Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A for Powerful Plants for Anti-Aging, medicinal plants to heal your chronic health conditions, overcome chronic pain, and increase vitality. I'm Ann Patricia with the Shift Network, and it is really my honor to be here to host as we explore the teachings of KP Khalsa and address your questions about his upcoming course, which begins on Thursday, February the 20th at 12 noon Pacific. Now, if you're unable to join us live for this course, you'll still be able to participate with us. So I'll explain more about that and many other things later in our program. But first, I want to introduce my guest. KP Khalsa, co-author of the book, The Way of Ayurvedic Herbs, has 49 years of experience. That's 49 years of experience in holistic medicine and is one of the foremost natural healing experts in North America. He's president emeritus of the American Herbalist Guild, holds a doctorate in Ayurveda, is a professor at Massachusetts College of Pharmacy, a founding faculty in the Ayurvedic Sciences program at Bastyr University, and a faculty member in the Botanical Medicine Department at the National College of Natural Medicine, where he trains naturopathic medical students and teaches Ayurveda. Please join me in welcoming KP with us. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Ann. Always my pleasure. Nice to see you again. Hello, everyone.
Yes, nice to have you here, KP. I'd like you to start by telling us a little bit about the questions that you'll be addressing today and what you'll be focusing on.
Right. We're going to be talking about using herbs to enhance your health span. You know, a major study just came out about Americans and their lives, and it turns out that we gained about 1/10 of a year in lifespan. We're right around 78 years average now, but our health span was only 66 years. So health span is the length of time that you're able to live without major disabilities. Yeah, you have a few aches and pains, you get the flu, but nothing keeping you from the things you want to do. That's a 12-year gap. So most Americans live the last 12 years of their lives in some state of disability. So we're going to talk about the kinds of things that you can do to prevent that. Now, we'd certainly like to be able to live as long as possible, and maybe 78 years sounds like it's right around the corner. It sounds like it's coming way too soon for me. So let's make that 98 or 108, but let's make our health span equal to our lifespan. How can we stay healthy? How can we treat the kinds of things that happen to everybody from the perspective of aging? So you're welcome to ask about particular individual herbs, preparations, things you've heard me talk about to clarify those kinds of things. The one thing that we really can't dig into is your own personal health situation. So I don't have enough information to give you advice about your situation. It may not be that interesting to other people anyway. So if you want to know in general about the benefits of certain kinds of herbs, great, how to use them, you can go out and try them on your own. You can consult with a professional, but we'll leave that personal diagnosis on the table for now.
Thank you for explaining that. Well, we'll be spending the rest of our time together exploring your questions for KP as we prepare for this video course, Powerful Plants for Anti-Aging, which begins on Thursday, February 20th at noon Pacific. Please visit our website, antiagingplantmedicine.com. antiagingplantmedicine.com. You'll be able to check out all 7 modules of the course and even find a link to register. So let's get started with questions. Thank you to everyone who sent in so many wonderful questions ahead of time through our webcast. And for those of you joining us live, please type your question into the chat and I will read it out. So we'll start with a question here from our webcast, KP. Larissa says, can you please clarify how to prepare the gotu kola? You mentioned brewing it overnight if possible. Does this mean keeping the water hot overnight? Also, what is the effect if it's steeped like a tea for minutes rather than hours? And do you not recommend we use capsules for this herb?
A lot of excellent questions about gotu kola. Well, first, let me just say that gotu kola is probably the premier nerve herb in the world. So it has 2 main characteristics that apply to the kinds of things we're talking about, staying healthy as we age. One is for the nervous system, so it enhances thinking, memory, cognition, that sort of thing, plus the actual physical structure of the nerves, so we can use it for crushing injury to the nerves or neurological diseases. That whole nerve area is one. The other one is that it's a superb healer for connective tissue. Connective tissue is what the physical structure of your entire body is made out of. And so that's muscle, skin, joints, bones, all made out of connective tissue. So gotu kola is world famous for millennia, really, for treating skin diseases and injuries. This is an herb that is pretty mild. And so in order to get very significant results out of it, you need to take a high enough dose if you're expecting to be able to notice the results fairly quickly. That which means a tea. Capsules are acceptable. It would work in capsules, but you just have to swallow a lot of capsules. Alternatively, you could just swallow the powder. You wouldn't have to encapsulate it. But a typical dose of gotu kola to have meaningful results in, let's say, a few weeks with things like memory would be about 4 tablespoons. That's kind of an overwhelming amount for most people. The active ingredients in gotu kola are water soluble, so we can use it as a tea. And just to clarify, tea preparations in general for our discussion, there are 2 ways that we make herbal medicine tea. And we really maybe even shouldn't call it tea, because that calls to mind images of a tasty beverage. None of these things we're going to talk about will taste good. You can raise your right hand and swear with me, they will not taste good. Repeat after me. So we don't expect them to taste good. They're medicine. We want them to do their job. If you want to add other things for flavor or sweetener or something, fine. What you'll end up with is sweet, nasty tasting tea, or a minty, nasty tasting tea, but that's up to you. So 2 ways that we prepare this herbal medicine brew. One is a decoction, which means that we simmer the ingredients. That's suitable for some herbs. The other is an infusion, which we're going to use for gotu kola, and that means that we steep the herb. So gotu kola tea is made by steeping or infusion. You start with water that's just been boiled. You add the herb, in this case, gotu kola, put the lid back on. You can wrap it in a towel or something if you want, and then you let it soak in that water that was originally boiled. It's gradually cooling down for at least an hour. That's probably adequate for most uses for gotu kola. You probably get 90% of the constituents out in an hour, but it can be up to 24 hours, and in those next 23 hours, you probably get out the last 10%. Then you squeeze it out very, very completely, so you get out every last bit of medicine and drink that tea, which is made by infusion.
Thanks for that. Another one around what you talked about in your intro is, since ashwagandha is a nightshade plant, do you ever find it inflammatory?
Well, I've never seen this. The thing about nightshades is that there are a lot of them, and there are people that have some concern about them, and opinions range from nothing to see here all the way to they're all poison and nobody should ever eat them, and everything. As probably with most things, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. For some people, they find that some nightshades cause some reactions, and often for people with osteoarthritis, it's a concern. The main culprit is usually tomatoes. I've never seen a nightshade reaction in ashwagandha. It is the root that we use in that case, and ashwagandha root has very little of the nightshade toxin compared to, let's say, the tomato sauce on a pizza. So it's theoretically possible. Some of my colleagues feel like no one should ever eat a nightshade. I'm not that extreme, but if people do have a reaction, we would want to then just sort of test out the ashwagandha. Some of my colleagues say that they've seen it. I haven't, so there you go.
Shirley is asking for some recommendations on plants for seasonal depression. She says lack of sunshine is a bummer for so many people. What can help this?
Let me recommend one that's my go-to for that. We're right in the winter now, of course, and I live in a cold, wet, rainy place. A lot of seasonal depression here. So I just got an email this morning. The title was Goksura Rocks, with about 4 exclamation points. And the herb that she was referring to was Goksura, because we use that herb for her seasonal depression, and she got, complete resolution. So this herb is spelled Gokshura. We'll talk about this herb when we talk about brain health in Module 5. Gokshura is a seed pod from an herb that grows throughout Asia, and actually it sneaked its way into North America in the fur of some farm animals back in the 50s, and so it's grown all over the place. You can see big patches of it in New Mexico, and I happen to be standing on the bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Oregon recently. I look down, I'm standing on Gokshura. Now, it doesn't like that kind of climate, so it doesn't really survive very well. It's a desert plant. The Gokshura seed pod, or what we would call Gokshura fruit, not fruit like a dessert pear, but botanically a fruit, very, very good for mood, stamina, sexual functioning. It has a real affinity for the urinary tract. Another thing we're going to be talking about in Module 7, bladder issues, overactive bladder, chronic bladder infection, that kind of thing, often affects people as they age. So Gokshura is a really multi-purpose herb, but it happens to have some constituents that are mood elevating, and in particular for the seasonal depression, it really helps. This is one that you could take in tablet form or powder because the dose is smaller than the Gotu-Kola that we talked about. A typical Gokshura dose is about 7 or 8 grams. It doesn't taste too bad. You could get it in powder form and stir it into a bite of mushy food and swallow it that way, or just stir it into water and chuck it down. It's available in tablets. With all these things that we're talking about, I'm a great believer in incremental dose increase. So these doses that I'm talking about are kind of the middle of the range that's likely to work for most people. Some people will get effects a little bit at a little bit lower dose, other people at a little bit higher dose, but start with a small amount. So with Gokshura, you might take 1 gram the first day, 2 grams the next day, 3 grams the next day. It's pretty feelable pretty quickly. You work your way up to the dose that gives you the results that you want, and you stabilize at that dose. A good idea to, with all these things, divide the dose as well. So in the case of Gokshura, let's say that 8 grams gives you that mental lift that you're looking for. You could take 4 with breakfast, 4 with lunch, something like that. Most of these things don't work better that way. They're just a little more comfortable in your tummy when you divide the dose.
Thanks, KP. So I heard you and really appreciated how you warned people that this isn't tasty tea. This is medicinal. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is there is a taste aspect. Taste plays a part in the healing properties of herbs, doesn't it? Can you speak about that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. All the big 3 herbal systems, Western, Ayurveda, and Chinese, and to be fair, that doesn't include all the indigenous herbalism of the planet. You've got, all of Latin America, all of Africa. There's another huge system called Unani that's 1 billion people, the herbal system of the Middle East. But the literature that we have in English is basically from those 3 big systems. So we call them the big 3. They all involve an understanding of taste. Taste is a way for your brain to understand the biochemical constituents that are in the herb or the food. You taste it, the brain says, aha, I know what that is. I better start doing the things I need to do to absorb it and metabolize that active ingredient and get it out into the tissues. So bitter taste is detoxifying and cooling, for example. Sour taste promotes digestive secretions and increases the digestive action. So these systems, especially Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, would like you to taste the herb and specifically do want you to use things in the form of powder stirred into food or tea or something so you will taste it. That's not an absolute requirement. Most people in our culture have a very narrow palate. They're used to a very narrow range of tastes. French fries with ketchup. And some of these things are kind of overwhelmingly bitter, sour, astringent, whatever, and it takes a while to work into those things. So if you end up taking things in capsules or you use some other ingredient to offset the taste of something, it's acceptable.
So you mentioned grinding and weighing. Can you talk about the tools that someone might have on hand if they'd like to prepare some of these herbal remedies at home?
Most of these things are going to be available in capsules or tablets one way or another. And if it's a potent enough herb that the dose is reasonable in pills, then go ahead and go for it. It's perfectly fine. Otherwise, you're going to need something to make tea in, which can just be a pan on your stove, and you can just squeeze it with your hands or through a sieve or something like that. You're going to need a small kitchen scale to be able to weigh things. We want to assess these doses by weight. Volume is just not adequate because they vary a lot in density, and some things are fluffy and some aren't. So a small kitchen scale. Most things can be ground for personal use in just a coffee grinder. One of those little $10 coffee grinders for most things will be fine. You put a little bit of something in there, you grind it to powder so you can swallow it. In the class, we may occasionally talk about a few other dose preparations, but mainly we're going to be talking about capsules, teas, and then for some of these things, powders.
All right. Are there any herbs that protect the eyes for those of us looking at screens all day long while working?
Probably the most famous herb in the world for eyes is the herb Amla, A-M-L-A. In Module 3, we're going to be talking about the sensory system. So ear and eye health, things like hearing loss, the aging eye, which is macular degeneration, the farsightedness of aging, that whole scenario. So this Amla is a fruit. Again, not a tasty fruit that you eat for dessert, but botanically a fruit. It's about the size of a golf ball. And it has a pit inside. The pit is removed. The flesh is dried. You end up with a powder. And a lot of good science on Amla for its benefit for the eyes. Amla is the number one most widely used herb in all of Ayurveda. So it benefits a huge number of things, but for the eye in particular is a benefit. The thing about it is that it works kind of slowly. So you're talking, maybe a year to really notice some significant changes in your vision, something like that. But that year is going to go by anyway, and you have another, 50 years to live. Amla would be a good choice for long-term eye health.
So, KP, for someone who has macular degeneration in their family, would Amla be something to start on early in life?
Yeah, probably. When we talk about macular degeneration, we'll throw in a few non-plant medicines, things that are modern supplements, because there are some new things that we've discovered through the science that are especially beneficial, and those are carotenoids, things that have that are yellow pigments that occur in plants. We'll throw in some plants as well there. And the main one there would be lutein, which is a carotenoid you can just get as a supplement. It comes from things like marigolds. It's what makes marigolds yellow. And it probably would be better taken as a supplement. We'll go through a wide variety of them, but that would be a good start, lutein and Amla.
Wonderful. Okay, Joanne and several others are concerned about impurities in herbs and would love to know what companies within the US you would recommend for purchasing herbs.
Oh boy, it's a very controversial issue. It's a long list. I'm not sure that I can go down a list of sort of the top five. I do have a list printed. I don't know if we can make that available to you, but professional quality is basically what you're looking for. The thing to do would be to consult an expert, and not the high school kid that worked at the health food store, but someone. You could go to one of the professional associations like the American Herbalist Guild or the National Association of Ayurveda or the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, and just talk to the staff there and say that you would like some advice on brands. They might even have some things on their website, but otherwise they might refer you to someone. You could have a 5-minute conversation, kind of a little bit too detailed for me to go into right now, but the point is very well made. A lot of times it's a question of what remedy you're looking for. So, for this remedy, go to that company. For another remedy, go to that company. It's not as easy as sort of there's one gold-plated company that everybody should use.
Okay, Patrick is saying, would you please talk about Gaviola and its benefits for diabetes, type 1 diabetes?
I only know about Gaviola very remotely. I've never used it. Sorry, can't comment.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, celery juice seems to be everywhere. Can you speak to this? Give us some advice that would help us decide if this is the right path for us.
Yeah, this is a classic thing that's been happening for, next year I'll be 50 years that I'm in this field. I learned about celery for the nervous system from my mentor the first year that I began uh, studying these sorts of things. And some of you know that I used to manage the nutritional therapy department of a holistic hospital, and we treated mainly neurological issues there. And so just about everybody there was drinking celery. They would be uh, admitted, and I would do their intake. And while we were filling out the forms, I'd have one of the staff go to the kitchen and make a celery juice for them, and I'd ask them to drink a quart of celery juice while we're sitting there working on it. So it's been known for a long time. All of a sudden, it's an overnight success, as these things go. So all these things that we've been doing for decades, oil pulling was just very recent. I just this morning read an article about Gwyneth Paltrow and oil pulling. Been doing oil pulling for 50 years. These things are very, very standard parts of traditional medicine. Those two happen to be from Ayurveda, but Western herbalism uses celery as well. So celery is generally beneficial for the nervous system. So we use it. It's somewhat similar to gotocolin. In fact, it's actually in the same botanical family as gotocolin. So it helps to heal injuries to the nerves. It's considerably more calming than gotocolin. So mainly we use it for people who are stressed, disconnected, have anxiety. Very good for that. It's also anti-inflammatory. So you can quell an allergic reaction with celery juice very quickly. So let's say that you have a cat allergy and you petted a cat and now you're sneezing. You could drink, let's say, 12 ounces of celery juice, and just while you're standing there watching it, the reaction will just completely calm down. So it's used by yogis as an aid to meditation. It doesn't really increase cognition that much, except in the sense that it helps you sort of direct your thoughts because you're less anxious. So sleeping, meditation, anxiety, the physical structure of the nerves themselves, and then outside of the nerve situation, the whole anti-inflammatory benefit for things like allergic issues. The medical medium is the person who made this all of a sudden just 6 months ago blow up. I don't know where he got it, but it just became one of those memes that everybody knew about, and now everybody's drinking celery juice. Is it suitable for every person? No. There's no remedy that's suitable for every person. It's probably not going to hurt most people. But one of the things you can be aware of when you use celery is that, oh, by the way, the reason we use juice is just because it's hard to eat enough celery to get the dose in. You can imagine, how much juice you would get out of an entire bunch of celery. And then imagine eating, chomping away on that as celery sticks. It'd just be very difficult. So you just juice it and drink the juice. Anyway, the kind of people that tend to have anxiety, insomnia, a kind of a frantic mind that won't shut off, do very well with celery, but they don't do very well with cold food and cold diet. So if you're going to be drinking celery juice, often people are making their own. You probably have it in the refrigerator. So if you juice it and drink it immediately, not so great for your digestion and your nervous system. So it's a good idea to let it come to room temperature before or after you put it through the juicer when you drink it. And of course, you can mix it with other things just for the sake of taste.
That's really helpful. I was wondering about that room temperature piece. So much great information about celery juice, KP. Thank you. Nanette is saying, do you have any help for adrenals and hormone health?
Yeah, definitely. The idea that the adrenals are somehow something individual and special has come out of recent, blogs and internet articles and things like that, and sort of naturopathic thinking over the past, let's say, 10 years. The adrenal glands are part of the endocrine system. The endocrine system is a system of hormone secreting glands that regulate every function in your body. Your heartbeat, your blood pressure, how fast you digest things, your body temperature, whether or not you're asleep or awake, literally everything. That system is a whole integrated network. They all give feedback to each other. They all give feedback to the brain. The brain is telling each of the glands what to secrete when on a literally just fraction of a second basis. Your brain is constantly monitoring this whole situation and telling your glands what to do. So there is really no way to heal your adrenal glands in a targeted way. And in fact, that goes for all your endocrine glands. We work on all of them. We work on adrenal insufficiency and thyroid issues and ovarian hormones and the whole thing. I like to think of the endocrine system as a symphony with the brain as a conductor, and they all are playing their own instrument. And for most Americans, what they have is, I would call, chronic endocrine dysregulation. Their endocrine system is just suboptimal. It's not enough to be declared a disease. Maybe if they saw a thyroid doc, they get a thyroid diagnosis. Maybe if they saw a gynecologist, they get an ovary diagnosis. But the problem is that the whole thing, it's a symphony without a conductor. So the glands are screaming at the brain, hey, I need more help here. I need more things to make hormones. And the brain is saying, work harder. I don't have anything else to give you. And they're all screaming like that. So it's this suboptimal degeneration that's the issue. That said, the things that we use to work on adrenal function and endocrine balance are long-term, slow-acting tonic herbs, or some of these, you'd hear the term adaptogens. So ashwagandha was mentioned earlier. That's a classic one. Ginseng is another example. Eleuthero, a ginseng-like herb that comes from Siberia, is another good choice. In fact, if you just want a very general herb for hormonal balance and endocrine health, including the adrenals, eleuthero is a real good choice. It's not gender specific. That's nice. It's relatively inexpensive. It's easily available. You can take it in capsules. And a typical dose of eleuthero root is perhaps 10 grams. But again, start with a gram, increase by a gram every couple days, work your way up. Some people find it a little bit over-energizing, so you don't want to take a lot late. That's usually not an issue, but you get up around 6-7 grams a day and you say, hey, I don't need a nap. I'm waking up with good energy. I'm making it through the day. And the longer you take it, the more healing it is and the more regulated that whole system becomes. We'll talk about a number of these in the class, things to stabilize energy, stamina, and things that ultimately enhance immune function and lifespan, because they're very broad acting. Things like ashwagandha and eleuthero.
All right. So I'm going to just give a little update here for those of you that joined us late. We're here with KP Khalsa, learning about his course, Powerful Plants for Anti-Aging. This begins on Thursday, February the 20th. Please join us by logging on to antiagingplantmedicine.com. You can read all about the modules and register there as well. So if someone is in their late 80s, had a stroke, is on blood thinner, blood pressure meds, can she safely take one of the herbs like gotu kola, ashwagandha, or would it be best for her to be under the care of an herbalist to track how these might interact with her prescriptive medications?
Let's just talk about interactions in general. This is a very common question. It's impossible to answer really with any certainty. There are hundreds of drugs, thousands of herbs. Very little study has been done. Most of the interactions that you read about on the internet are just guesses by pharmacologists. And of course, they tend to be conservative. So they recommend that, you don't take anything, because for a medical doctor, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And so they know how drugs act. They know the side effects. They know the effects. And you throw in another unknown that they're not trained in, they just say, no, it's simpler to do what we know. The likelihood of interactions is actually quite low. The few studies that have been done have found very small percent of potential interactions with these things. That said, the case you described is very complex. And so, yes, a person should see a knowledgeable practitioner, virtually everybody that I see is taking drugs. That's what people turn to because that's what they're used to in our culture. So when I see them, they're using drugs, and then we have to work out some kind of a communication with their prescriber about how to handle that issue, and that's a challenging conversation. But the likelihood that there's going to be any issue is minimal. So usually we can add herbal medicine to drugs and not expect a problem. Professionals will be trained in this. Kinds of things we're talking about in this class are even less likely to cause problems. I'm selecting sort of herbs that are less problematic for that issue here. So yeah, somebody like that should see a professional.
All right, we have a few questions about digestive related issues. Tanya's asking about the best herbs for constipation, and Luisa's asking about IBS.
What was the second one?
IBS, irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah, okay. So, well, let me suggest, there is no one single best herb for any condition, including constipation. So it depends on the person and a whole bunch of other details. But let me suggest one that's likely to work quite well. This herb is Haritaki, Haritaki, Haritaki. This is one of the most important herbs, again, in Ayurveda. It's also used in Chinese medicine. It's a very slow, comfortable herb that acts to promote bowel movements. It promotes a bowel movement in about 12 or 14 hours, very gentle. So you take it in the evening. Ideally, we would like people to be awakened by having a bowel movement. So rather than using an alarm clock, you feel that natural urge to get up. You say, oh, time for my bowel movement. First thing, you go right to the bathroom. When everything is working, ideally, that's what happens. So you have to kind of adjust the time you take the Haritaki. Maybe it'll be with dinner, maybe mid-evening, somewhere in there. Again, start with 1 gram, work up by 1 gram a day. For most people, it's around 5 grams that will promote a very comfortable bowel movement first thing in the morning. Haritaki. Haritaki is also a fruit like Amla. It's actually related to Amla. So it's a dried fruit. It'll be available in tablets, things like that. Irritable bowel syndrome is a diagnosis that basically is given by GI docs when they don't have any other options. It's diagnosed when all the other things that could cause the symptoms have been investigated and determined not to be the case. We now know that almost every case of irritable bowel syndrome is caused by bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. That's pretty much become the consensus over the last year or two. And even though when we didn't know about small intestine bowel overgrowth and we were dealing with IBS, we talked about IBS and treated it, and now we know that the connection is there. So we do some tests, make sure that the bugs are there, kill them, reconstitute the proper environment in the gut, and usually that handles the IBS. IBS is such a broad diagnosis that probably it doesn't account for every case, or bowel overgrowth doesn't account for every case of IBS, but we now think that that's the case. So that's sort of the disease du jour now, is the small intestine bowel overgrowth. Most people have some kind of an issue with the bacteria in their digestive tract. But is it sort of the core issue for everybody? No. These things go in cycles and people get interested in things. And right now, the thing that everybody's interested in is the microbiome in the gut, for good reason. It's an important thing, but it's not that much more important than anything else. So now we're focused on this issue. Our attention will turn to something else. 2 years ago it was inflammation. Now it's intestinal bowel overgrowth. And they all contribute. We have to, take a holistic look at the whole thing. Anyway, IBS, now we think mainly SIBO, small intestine bowel overgrowth. And when we treat that, it works well. Otherwise, there wasn't a whole lot that we could do for IBS. The symptoms were vague. We didn't really know what caused it. We could treat it to a certain extent. And we're getting much more of a handle on it now.
All right, Nat is asking, she says, I appreciated your teachings on the 4 anti-aging herbs and how each works with the nervous system. Do you have any other favorite herbs or nutrients to support a jumpy nervous system? They seem to jump with surprise at loud noises these days.
Well, one very basic one you could consider is valerian. Valerian is the most famous herb uh, for sedation, relaxation, anxiety, insomnia in Europe. It's a European herb, but widely used here. I'm in North America. I guess not all of you are, but widely used in North America and Western Europe and all the places that Western herbalism traveled. So all the British colonies and the places that this European style herbalism went. So valerian is widely available. You can take modest doses throughout the day. It's an herb that is largely known for sleep. So if you take a high dose at bedtime, it works very rapidly, 10 minutes, and helps you sleep. It only lasts about 4 hours. That's kind of a disadvantage. So for people that have difficulty falling asleep, it's great. For people who have difficulty staying asleep, it's a bit of a problem. But for the kind of thing you're describing, you can take small amounts during the day. So you might take a gram with breakfast, see how that goes. The next day, maybe a gram with breakfast, a gram with lunch, and just stair-step your way into it and find the dose that's not uncomfortably sedating, but that just kind of takes the edge off things. And any health food store would have it. It's really well tolerated, easily available, inexpensive. So there's one you could try.
Great. Shoshana is asking, can anything herbally be done for multiple chemical sensitivities?
Absolutely. There's no individual herb answer for this thing. I treat multiple chemical sensitivities. In fact, for 10 years in my practice, that's all I did. So I waded deeply in these waters for a long time. We know that there are many things that can be done. Each case is considerably different. If I were to sort of give a summary, I would go back to those adaptogens or long-term rebuilding tonics. So we mentioned the ashwagandha and ginseng and eleuthero. Another one that you could consider is the herb rhodiola, 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 available in any health food store. Very famous remedy. The nice thing about rhodiola is that it's feelable a little quicker than some of these other things. Ashwagandha is kind of slow to be feelable. A rhodiola is often feelable as you get the dose up. You can start to feel an increase in energy, but it has this long-term stabilizing effect. So there's an adaptogen that works well for people. It stabilizes and treats so many systems in the body: immune function, digestion, sleep, all of those kinds of issues. It's not a one-stop answer for multiple chemical sensitivity, but it is a good start across the board for these issues. It's a complicated situation, and it needs to be addressed holistically. I mean, you just have to methodically start with the things that are out of balance and work your way toward it, but it's extremely treatable with some patience.
AP, can you share the dosage and preparation for rhodiola, please?
Rhodiola is almost always available only as an extract. So generally speaking, I'm not real supportive of standardized extracts. They tend to just make the product cost more for no great benefit. But rhodiola is almost always available exclusively that way. So you would just start with a modest dose. It's always in pill form. And so you just start with a modest dose, like a gram of the extract in a pill, and just add that gradually.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So Lee is asking, with so many benefits to all these herbs, how many, let's see, well, let's just see, can they be safely taken on a regular basis? Is there any danger of stressing out one's liver?
That's a common question, and no, at the doses that we're talking about. Yes, that's theoretically possible, but the idea that you would overwhelm your liver with these things, the kinds of things we're talking about, there are some herbs that are stressful for the liver. We don't use them. and we won't be talking about them in class. But the doses we're talking about are way below any kind of a dose that would be an issue. So it's a valid concern, but it's not going to be an issue with the things that we're talking about.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for all these great questions, and we're going to get back to more of them in just a moment. But before I take those, I want to share a few important details about powerful plants for anti-aging. As you can tell from this time with KP, it's going to be an educational and potentially life-changing 7 weeks for those of you that decide to take the journey with KP. You're going to learn how to prevent and even reverse age-related health issues. The 7-module course takes place on Thursdays at 12 noon Pacific, and that will be starting February the 20th. So you'll receive audio and video replays, transcripts, and any other materials through your course homepage. And also, I like to remind you that we offer a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses. We give you a full 2 weeks, in this case until March the 5th, to make sure that you absolutely love this course. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect to our private Facebook community group to stay connected with one another and the course. Everyone who registers receives the Powerful Plants for Anti-Aging bonus collection. This includes 3 video teachings you'll receive with this course, and I'll go through them one at a time. Natural Beauty with Ayurveda and Yoga. That's a video from KP. Top 10 Ayurvedic medicines that are not herbs, also video from KP. And the final video from KP, Natural Remedies for Farsightedness of Middle Age. That's Natural Remedies for Farsightedness of Middle Age. And when you register by midnight Pacific today, February 13th, you'll receive this special bonus, Herbal Solutions for Stress and Anxiety. Such a common issue right now. That's also a video with KP. After watching this powerful webinar with KP, you'll know which anti-anxiety herbs can help you reduce or eliminate your anxiety, including fast-acting tinctures that can help you quickly get your cool back. That sounds awesome. All right, we're going over to this question from Elizabeth. KP, what is your daily herbal regimen?
I take some sort of a long-term stamina-enhancing tonic, which these days is ashwagandha. And then it varies depending on the season and what's happening in my life. So right now I'm concerned about immune kinds of issues, as we all probably are. But it's flu season, regardless of what's happening, on planes and in China. It's the flu season, so I want to make sure to use things that are a little bit extra supportive of that whole situation. So I change it every day, or not every day, but maybe weekly or monthly according to the season. And I use things that are suitable for my particular physiology. So I have a body that tends to go in the direction of being cold and wet if I allow that to happen. So I use some warming herbs like ginger. Those things are usually in there. And then some other long-term, slow-acting, anti-aging supplements that are not necessarily herbs, like coenzyme Q10.
All right. We have a question about calamus that you shared in the intro. The use of calamus in foods has been prohibited in the United States by the FDA, and I guess the Indian variety of calamus contains something that's subsequently banned from use in foods in the US. Can you speak about this, your expert thoughts this participant would like to ask you about?
Yeah, this is a controversial issue, and it's technical and detailed, so I'll simplify it a little bit. There's a constituent in calamus called beta-acerone that is a carcinogen. There's no doubt that it's a carcinogen, and the question is, what kind of dose is safe and effective, and is it something that you want to use? I've come to the conclusion that it's a non-issue. We don't use calamus for long periods of time, generally. We use it for enhancing sensory function and intellect and things like that. It's used in Ayurveda with absolute casual freedom. There's no concern about it. And again, it's been used in Ayurveda for millennia, and there hasn't been any concern about that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have a problem, because people might not have been able to see that. They take Calamus every day for a few months or years, and then years later they have cancer and don't make the connection. So you have to sort of figure out where you are with this. Calamus is used in Chinese medicine and Western herbal medicine, both of those systems relatively casually. So the deal is, the FDA, not the FDA, but some scientists decades ago, this information is very old, injected this isolated beta-acerone from Calamus into rats, and the rats developed cancer. Now, they, as is usual with these things, they injected amounts that were hundreds or even thousands of times larger than anybody would ever actually get from taking Calamus as a whole herb. The law is that if anything is ever discovered to cause cancer in animals, it has to be banned for internal consumption in the United States. So most of you are probably not going to be extracting beta-acerone from Calamus and injecting it into your abdomen. If you do, you'll have to deal with whatever the consequences are. But we're talking about taking very modest amounts as a whole herb. That's never been studied. We should do that. We should do that study where people, or if you want to use animals, take it orally in the normal way in normal doses, and then find out if anything happens. This technique of giving an animal huge amounts of something to see what happens is a really common starting technique for investigating things, but the results are almost meaningless, because almost anything that you would extract from a plant and inject in thousands of times dose into a rat is going to do something that's not so good. So you're certainly free not to take Calamus. I feel comfortable recommending it based on the information that I know. And it's because of this archaic situation with the FDA and then these very old studies that it's still a concern.
Thank you for addressing that, KP. Cynthia and a few others are asking about some recommendations for chronic pain, osteoarthritis, joint pain.
Yeah, well, simple ginger is one of the ones that comes to mind, very much from the Ayurvedic and Chinese perspective. That's an herb that has an affinity for the joints. It's attracted to the joints, and it brings warmth and circulation to the joints to help enhance the production of synovial fluid and increase flexibility and things like that. Let me suggest another one that's a pure analgesic. That is, it's just a painkiller. And this is a Chinese herb called Corydalis, Corydalis, Corydalis. It's the #1 herb for pain in Chinese medicine. And it's a root. It's available very easily from Chinese herb suppliers. It'll be dried and sliced, so it comes at little slices. Each slice is about the size of a cornflake in cornflake cereal, and you make tea out of that. Now, in that case, we're going to decoct it. We talked about the 2 ways to make tea, so we're going to simmer it. You want to simmer it for about an hour, not a rolling boil, but just enough so that the surface of the water is moving in a covered pan. And then again, squeeze it out. Typical dose is about 30 grams. You might not need that much. Divided doses with food would be the best. You might start out with 5 grams made into tea, and then the next day take 10 grams, the next day take 15, and over a few days work your way up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, 30 grams. That works very quickly. It's a warming herb. Osteoarthritis is a cold condition. So Corydalis is a warming herb like ginger is. And you begin to feel it in about 10, 15 minutes, and it lasts for about 4 hours. So if you divide the dose up throughout the day, you can drink, the half a cup of strongly brewed tea every 4 hours, something like that. Likely to work really well.
That's a great recommendation. Thanks, KP. Bridget is asking about herbs that promote positive thoughts and mental well-being.
Yeah, great thing to discuss. Well, let me suggest hibiscus. I had to think for a minute because there's so many actually, especially from an Ayurvedic tradition. In Ayurveda, every herb has physical, mental, and spiritual attributes. And since Ayurveda, like Chinese medicine, is an energetic system, I just mentioned about the warm cold thing with the arthritis. Ayurveda is concerned about how the herb affects your underlying metabolism, which includes things like your mood. So let me suggest hibiscus. It's something that is very well known here. People enjoy it as a beverage. It actually tastes good. So we took an oath to understand that these wouldn't taste good. Hibiscus actually does. Hibiscus in Ayurveda is called japa, which means meditation with a mantra. It enhances the state of mind that you develop with meditation. Has a lot of other great uses. It regulates menstruation and numerous things like that. But from a mental perspective, it enhances the meditative mind. The dose has to be a bit higher than usual. In fact, if we go back to, I didn't answer the question way back in the beginning about gotu kola. What would happen if you steeped gotu kola for a few seconds in a cup of water? What would happen is nothing. You wouldn't get the constituents out. Same situation with a hibiscus. If you use a hibiscus tea bag, that's about 2 grams. And if you steep it for 3 minutes, you're going to get almost nothing. So you want to steep it for at least an hour. And then you're talking about 15, 20, 30 grams as a dose to enhance your meditative concentration from the hibiscus.
So Melody is asking about herbs that help with thin, sagging, aging skin. And I know you'll be spending a whole module on skin. So give us a little bit of a taste of that, please.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mentioned gotu kola earlier. So that's one of the main herbs that it just, gotu kola is stellar for those two things, nerve and connective tissue. So that would be a good one to try. But let me add violet leaf. There are 3 types of violet that are easily available. One from China, one from Europe, which is called wild pansy, actually, but pansies are a type of violet, and one from India. And they're all very similar. They're closely related. We use the entire plant, actually. Wild violets only grow about 6 inches tall, so they just yank out the whole plant, knock the dirt off the root, and dry it, and you cook it up as tea. All 3, they're more or less interchangeable, and they're very, very good for skin. The main thing that skin does to be a problem is that it inflames. And so all of those are profoundly anti-inflammatory. They help to bring moisture to the skin, so the skin becomes more flexible. And all in all, just one of my favorite skin herbs all the way around. Typical dose of violet as tea is about 30 grams. So that means you weigh out 30 grams on a scale and you cook that into the water and drink that. That would be a typical dose. Number 1 herb in Chinese medicine for the skin. In our skin health module, we'll dig deeply into a whole bunch of things that happen with the skin and talk about many herbs for many stages of life. But it's definitely possible to reverse skin kinds of issues. The thing about skin is that it's a low priority organ for your body. I know we all like to have beautiful skin, but your skin doesn't have to look great in order for you to survive, digest food, breathe, so things like your brain and lungs and liver are much more important. So as you start to age, your body doesn't have everything that it needs to give all your organs the parts that the resources they need. So it starts to allocate these nutrients to the important organs, and things like your skin, which is nice to have, but not necessary to stay alive, start to age faster than some of those other organs. And so you have to have some patience when working on your skin, because your body's saying, wait a minute, I want to give whatever I have in reserve to the brain and the lungs, and I'll get to the skin later. So it takes a while, but we treat skin issues every day of the week. They tend to be slower, and just have some patience. You could start with violet and gotu kola.
Great. Izzy is asking about any herbal remedies that might support her in quitting smoking.
Yeah. If you, I may be opening up the floodgates here, but if you go to my website, just use my name. You can find my website easily, and just use the contact link. I can send you a whole article that I wrote on quitting smoking, which would, you can start with that. But let me recommend one herb from Ayurveda. This herb is Vasaka. It's Vasaka, Vasaka. And it's a lung remedy that helps open up breathing. It doesn't do anything really for the craving and all of that. You have to have kind of a multi-step process to work on quitting smoking. But Vasaka will help to just get more air into your lungs, heal the tissue of your lungs. It's a relatively low dose herb, so about 6 or 8 grams often is very feelable for better breathing. And often when people just sort of feel better with their breathing in general, they find that their stopping smoking is enhanced. So 6 or 8 grams of Vasaka in tablets would be fine.
Wonderful. Well, we do not have enough time to get through all of this today. We just want to keep you here. And as you can all tell, we have quite a course coming up for you. I want to thank everyone for being with us. Powerful Plants for Anti-Aging begins on Friday, February the 20th. And again, please go over and visit antiagingplantmedicine.com to learn more about this course and to register. And if you do so by midnight Pacific tonight, February 13th, you'll receive a special bonus. That was a video teaching entitled Herbal Solutions for Stress and Anxiety. I want to pass it over to you, KP, to just share with us your call out. Like, what is so exciting to you about sharing this work? We can tell it's just what you live, breathe in your life. And we can see how just being with you, there's so much. I've been fiercely writing, as I know many of us have been, to learn, a lot to learn from you. So I pass it over to you to share whatever you'd like to share as your closing remarks today.
I've just been so impressed by how well natural healing works. I don't have time to go into my whole story, but I will tell you that story later as this course comes closer. But I was diagnosed at age 10 with a terminal disease that kills people by age 40. Obviously, I've made it past 40 now. And, I've never taken a prescription medication. I don't use any now. I'm in the 0.1% of 66-year-old adults that don't take medicine and don't have any medical conditions. And so just in my case, that I've been given an extra 26 years of life and hopefully many more to come, a tremendous gift. But I just see the power of these things every single day. And in other places in the world, this is just absolutely assumed. It's completely natural that you would use these things in childhood and then through puberty and then ongoing adult. And now we're talking about the anti-aging kinds of things. And people have seen their aunts and uncles and everybody in their village using these things. And it's just natural that you would do it. In the developed world, we've just sort of lost touch with these things. Fortunately, I was able to tune into it very early and be able to see what it does. We've rescued the whole system now in North America, and we have effective treatments for very serious conditions. And anti-aging is a snap compared to the other things that we're doing. You just have to take a methodical, consistent approach, get going with some things, and know that you're going to be doing that for decades. But I would like us to get together when we're all 110, in the rocking chair on the porch of the herbalist's old age home, and talk about how things were back in 2020 and how glad we are that we got going with all this.
Let's all meet on those rockers at the same time. 110.
Right.
Meet you guys there. KP, you said something about your website, and I know we're going to get a lot of questions. Can you please share that with us so that if someone wants to check out your website, they can do so?
It's International Integrative, all one word, .com, internationalintegrative.com. But the best way to get there, probably, frankly, is just to Google my name. You can just use my initials, KP, and my last name, Khalsa. It'll get you right there. And then if you're interested in that stopping smoking thing, we'll kind of collate the requests over the next few days and then send out a mass email with that information. So if you want that, you can have it. Otherwise, there's a plethora of things there to check out.
Yes, and we would really urge you to join us for this course where you're going to get a wealth of knowledge. Just this, times 7. Antiagingplantmedicine.com starts February the 20th, and we can't wait to have you with us. So Thanks, KP, for being here. It's been a delight as always.
Nice to be with you again, Anne, and everybody out there. Nice to check in with you and have a chance to kind of connect with some of these things. Looking forward to see you in the course. If not that, sometime else soon. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, antiagingplantmedicine.com to register. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. On behalf of all of us here at the Shift Network, we wish you well. Bye now.